In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make 360 bubbles inside the game, allowing you to freely look around your environment. In Myst 3 and 4, these 360 bubbles were achieved by putting the player controller inside a 3D box with 6 projected pre-rendered sides. The engine then used a shader to combine these images, giving them a spherical appearance. This approach has a considerable advantage over the way we'll be doing it in GameMaker. For instance, you could more easily place 3D objects inside the scene, which are not bound to this static projection. While GameMaker's 360-degree projection has notable limitations, I think omitting this section would be remiss, so it's here as a bonus. What we're going to make is a single rendered panoramic image, which GameMaker will project into the illusion of a spherical perspective. I'll also show you how we can handle navigating between these 360 nodes. A quick note. While it's feasible to use 360 plus perspective nodes interchangeably, I'd recommend picking one or the other for your project. Back inside Blender, let's make a new camera to capture our 360-degree scene. In the camera settings, set the type to panoramic. Set the panorama type to equirectangular. Set latitude min to -90, max to 90. Longitude min to -180, and max to 180. Next, go to Output Properties and set the resolution to 4000 by 2000. This is the minimum size, which will generate a clear panoramic image. Render out the image and import it as a sprite into your game. Back in GameMaker, so right now I'm opening up my cursor object and I'm back inside the Create event, and we're going to add some stuff to this object. So before, we only had our one cursor mode, which is 0 being the perspective, the fixed perspective mode, and 1, the 360 panorama mouse look mode. So we're going to initialize cursor mode to 1, which is sort of arbitrary because in the step event, we'll sort of be just setting it back to 0 anyway, so you could really initialize it to 0. It doesn't really matter. But we're going to write if cursor underscore mode equals 1. So we're going to center the mouse at the screen's midpoint upon game start. So display, so open brackets, display underscore mouse underscore set, open parentheses, display underscore get underscore width, close parentheses, divided by 2. Display underscore get underscore height, close parentheses, divided by 2. So the display width versus the display height divided by 2. So half of that's going to give you the center of the screen. Layer equals name. Layer underscore name equals layer underscore get underscore fx. So we're calling upon the fx layer, which we have called effect underscore 1. So if we were to open our Pano room, you'll notice that there's this effect layer, effect underscore 1. So in that effect layer, we have applied our panorama background effect, right? And so in order to carry out events on this layer, we need to reference this effect layer name. So I'll be reusing this for whenever there's a room with a 360 panorama. I'm going to reuse that. So then we're going to say Vx equals 0 and Vy equals 0. Close brackets. In this step event, now I've done something very kind of weird and placeholder, but you could definitely improve this. There's definitely a better way to do it. I simply have written at the start, if room does not equal RM panorama and room does not equal RM panorama near lock. So these are my two rooms associated with my two locations, pano and near lock. Cursor mode equals 0. So if we're not in those rooms, we're just going to hard code the cursor mode to 0. We're just going to boot it out to 0. Else cursor mode equals 1, right? So if we're in those rooms, we're in 360 mode. If we're not in those rooms, we're not in 360 mode. So again, I'm just doing this because my, tutorial switches back and forth between perspective and panorama. But again, like I said, you're going to want to use one or the other. You probably won't want to use both. Otherwise, there's more elegant ways to code this. So if cursor mode equals 0, this was here before, but now if cursor underscore mode equals 1, we're going to open up a new bracket. we're going to go x equals room underscore width divided by 2, y equals room height, room underscore height divided by 2. So this is going to snap the cursor to the center of the screen. I have variable sensitivity equals 1. So this is our mouse sensitivity, and we're going to affect this by essentially writing vx plus equals parentheses display underscore mouse underscore get underscore x minus display underscore get underscore width divided by 2, room underscore width times sensitivity. And then you can duplicate this line and just change it to vy, get height instead of get width, room height instead of room width times sensitivity. Then display underscore mouse underscore set, open parentheses, display underscore get underscore width divided by 2, comma, display underscore get underscore height divided by 2. All right. So then we're referencing our layer name once again. So layer underscore name equals layer get fx, effect1. Then we'll update the panoramic direction. So fx set parameter, open parentheses, layer underscore name, comma, and then we're going to use, so there's these different fx parameters that you can modify. So there's built-in fx layer functions that you can use. So the one we're going to be using is called g underscore panorama direction. And we're going to go comma, open brackets vx, comma, vy, close that. And then we're also going to limit the vx and vy values. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it so if we tilt our head, all the way up towards the sky, it prevents us from flipping the camera back around on ourselves. So we'll write if vx is greater than 1, vx equals 0. If vx is less than 0, vx equals 1. If vy is greater than 1, vy equals 1. If vy is less than 0, vy equals 0. Okay, that's the step event. And then into the draw event, we're just going to write some additional debug text down here. So if global.debug equals true, draw underscore text x, comma, y plus 10, comma, vx plus string vx. And then you can duplicate that and then just swap this to y plus 20, vy, string vy. So this is just going to display the vx and vy position, which is, again, our 360 mouse tracking position. And that's it for the adjustments to the cursor code. Next, open up your global controller object, and we're going to make some adjustments. So in the create event, right? In the create event, we're going to add a few things. So under initialize variables, we're going to add global.current underscore zone underscore index equals 0. So essentially, this is going to allow us to track which zone is selected, because for the debug purposes, we're going to have zones that allow us to click in and out of different locations. But in order to position those, it's going to be helpful to have a debug mode, and I'll explain how that works in a second. So if you go to the step event now, we're going to make some changes. So this is all of our perspective code. We're going to make a new section, and it's going to be for panoramic mode. So if cursor underscore lock equals false and camera mode equals 1, open brackets, open this bracket. So we need a way to communicate which direction we're going to be facing based on the zone that we're currently looking at. And again, some of this is for the purposes of transitioning back and forth between perspective and panoramic. So if cursor underscore forward underscore pan, so remember we made these different states. So cursor underscore forward underscore pan means place underscore meeting, cursor underscore x, cursor underscore y, obj zone pan parent. And we haven't made this zone object yet, but we will later in this tutorial. So you might want to take a second actually to just write in this code here we're going to be using these object states. So cursor forward pan inst, which is instance place. So the instance, the individual panoramic object instance that we are touching, that's going to be it really for the panoramic stuff. So we'll need that. Going back down, so if cursor forward pan, so if we're touching that forward examine object and we press the mouse button, then we're going to do the following. So if cursor forward pan, so if our cursor is meeting object zone pan parent, it's meeting that parent object, open brackets, direction underscore facing equals cursor underscore forward underscore pan underscore inst dot exit direction. So inside of, and again, we haven't made this yet, but inside of these panoramic zone objects, there's going to be an exit direction variable specified. So let's say I'm facing south, right? I'm pointing to the south in my 360. So when I exit the panorama and I'm in fixed perspective mode, my direction needs to be 4 because 4 corresponds with the southern index. So it's pulling that variable and it's saying, okay, if I click on this, which direction would I exit to? And so it's passing that variable. So back inside the step event, right? Direction underscore facing, this variable is going to be updated to that, right? So then we'll exit into the perspective, the fixed perspective mode, and we'll be facing the correct direction, right? We won't be looped back around. So then if we click on that zone, so if cursor underscore forward underscore pan and mouse check button released, mouse button left, so if we click, then we're going to do a few things. Next location equals cursor underscore forward underscore pan underscore inst dot exit location. So this specific instance's exit location is our next location. Our direction facing is its exit direction. And then our location current, we're going to be setting to the next location, which is this. And then it's our room transition script yet again, right? So that's going to place us in that next room. And then I just have a quick code down here that's very similar to the cursor, which just says if room does not equal RM panorama and room does not equal RM panorama near lock, the camera mode equals 0. So the fixed perspective mode, otherwise it equals panoramic mode. Next, we're going to create a debug code that is going to allow us to cycle through the panoramic objects in debug mode, and I'll show this on screen right now. So essentially what happens is if you're in debug mode and you press spacebar, you can cycle through the current children of OBJ zone pan parent. And then that essentially allows you to adjust the zone positions with the arrow keys. So you can use the arrow keys and move these, because otherwise you'd have to move them within the room editor. And I found that it's very difficult to actually get a precise movement when you need these zones to be in specific areas. So this allows us to kind of get the height in, the X and Y coordinates, so we can manually write those XY coordinates to the objects. So if global.debug equals true, open brackets, if parentheses keyboard underscore check underscore released, so if we pressed VK underscore space, open brackets, we're going to count how many zone objects there are. So we're going to make variable called zone underscore count equals instance underscore number, open parentheses, obj underscore zone underscore pan underscore parent. So how many instances of the pan parent object are there? So if there is at least one, so we're going to go if zone count is greater than 0, right? Deselect all the zone objects. So this is going to be handled with a for loop. So for open parentheses var I equals 0, semicolon I is less than zone underscore count, semicolon I plus plus, variable zone underscore inst equals instance underscore find, open parentheses, obj underscore zone pan parent, comma I. if zone inst does not equal no one, open brackets, zone inst dot selected equals false, close brackets, close brackets. Then we're going to update the global index and cycle around if needed. So if we've, cycled through all of them, is that there's 3, and then we're on the second instance, we'll go back to instance 0. All right. So global dot current underscore zone underscore index equals parentheses global dot current underscore zone underscore index plus 1 mod zone underscore count. Then we'll select that zone object. So var selected underscore zone equals instance underscore find, open parentheses, obj underscore zone underscore pan parent, comma, global dot current underscore zone underscore index. If the selected zone does not equal no one, then that selected zone equals true. So if we're not selecting, if there is something there, we'll select it. So if selected underscore zone does not equal no one, selected underscore zone dot selected equals true. Close bracket, close bracket, close bracket, close bracket. Okay, so that was a lot, and it's a little complicated, but that is the code that you'll need for this debug. And then, so back into the draw event. So if we're in this cursor forward pan state, right, if this is true, then we're going to draw some text. Open brackets, draw underscore text, x comma y plus 135. The variable, so pan object exit direction plus string cursor forward pan inst dot exit direction. So this will allow us to look to see the exit direction of panoramic zone object that we're hovering our mouse over. And then we can copy this, adjust the pixels a little bit, exit location plus string cursor forward pan inst dot exit location. So we can see, all right, when we're hovering our mouse over the panoramic zone, what direction will that lead me to, and what exit location will that lead me to? So that way, if it's the wrong direction or if it's the wrong location, we can adjust it. And then we're going to just draw the camera mode. So draw text x, y plus 165, comma, camera mode plus string camera underscore mode. So this will show us if we're in camera mode 0 or 1. So if there's a problem when we're accidentally in the wrong camera mode, it will reveal that problem, right? Next, go back to the create event. Before, when defining the location indexes of our nodes, we had separate rooms specified to represent the different directions you can face. We still need a new location. In this case, I just made 2, one called Pano and a second called near underscore lock. But the indexes will all be the same room, a single room for Panorama. Note that the only reason I have to do this is because we're using both the fixed perspective and the 360 bubble system in the same game, which again, I don't recommend. If you were only using the 360 bubbles, you could simplify this by just having the room's DS map be a single index. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's make a room called rm underscore panorama. In the layers tab, create an effect layer called effect underscore 1. On the right side panel, under filters and effects, set the effect type to panorama background. Select your 360 render sprite as the panorama texture. I chose to leave everything else as default. Run the game. Whee! We can look around our 360 room. So cool. Our head tilt is limited in both directions, so it doesn't flip back around on itself. Okay, great. But how do we get from one panoramic bubble to another? For this, we need a new type of zone object. Unlike previous zone objects, which are reusable, these will be one-time use. There's probably a more efficient way to do it, but hey, I'm doing this for free. I can't do everything myself, Create an object called obj underscore zone underscore pan underscore parent, which will be the parent object of all future Pano zones. It's nice because it means when we make a new Pano zone, we can just set this object as the parent, and all we need to adjust is the create event code. Okay, so inside obj zone pan parent, we're going to set the sprite to our zone forward sprite. And in the create event, we're going to adjust a few things. So panorama underscore x equals 0. Panorama underscore y equals 0. Exit underscore location equals empty quotation marks. So when we click on this, Where will it lead us? What location will it lead us? Again, those locations are defined in the global controller object. Exit underscore direction equals 0. So this will be updated and changed in the create event of any copy of this panoramic object that we make, or any child, should I say, of this object that we make. Will be basically just swapping in the direction that it will lead us and the location that will lead us. Selected equals false for debug purposes. Layer underscore name equals layer get fx effect1. In the step code, you're going to write the following. Pano width, we're going to make a var, making a bunch of variables actually. So var pano underscore width equals room underscore width. Variable pano underscore height equals room underscore height. Variable pano underscore direction underscore x underscore, dir, but referring to direction, equals fx get parameter, layer underscore name g underscore panorama direction, and then 0 in brackets. And then you can copy this and paste it and then change the x to y and change this to 1. So this is the horizontal direction and this is the vertical direction. Then we'll calculate the offsets. So we'll go variable visible underscore x equals pano underscore width times pano underscore dir underscore x. Copy and paste that and change this to visible y. Pano height times pano underscore dir underscore y. Then we'll actually place the object on the screen. So x equals panorama underscore x minus visible underscore x. Y equals panorama underscore y minus visible underscore y. And then if we're rotating and the object comes out of view, then we'll wrap it around the screen. So essentially what this is doing is it's placing the panoramic zone as a rectangle that will be sliding around essentially in tandem with our cursor position, but the opposite. Right? So it's technically always on screen, but it's not always in a position where our cursor could actually click on it. And you can see that here, when I'm in debug mode. So wrap around if the object is out of view. So if x is less than 0, x plus equals pano underscore width. If x is greater than pano width, x minus equals pano width. If y is less than 0, y plus equals pano height. If y is greater than pano height, y minus equals pano height. And then this is going to allow us to actually adjust the debug position. So this panorama X and panorama Y position, that is where it's going to actually be drawn on screen. So when you go into the debug mode and you move these zones around, you're going to want to input this position that you get once you're in the correct place. If selected equals true, if in debug mode I've selected this current instance of the zone object. If global.debug equals true and keyboard check VK right, so my right arrow key, panorama underscore X plus equals 10, move it 10 pixels to the right. So if global.debug equals true and keyboard check VK left, so I'm pressing the left, panorama underscore X minus equals 10. If global.debug equals true and keyboard check VK up, panorama Y minus equals 10, so we're going to move it up 10 pixels. And if global.debug equals true and keyboard check VK down, we'll move it down the screen 10 pixels, right? And then in the draw event, if global.debug equals true, draw self. If selected equals true, open brackets, draw set color to see white, draw text 10, 10, panorama X plus string panorama underscore X. And then we can copy this and do the same for panorama Y. Draw set color to see black, close brackets, close brackets. So this, again, it's going to draw that panorama X and Y variable to the screen so we know how to set these variables in the child objects that we make. And that is it for the parent object. With the parent setup, let's make a new Pano zone, which will take us to a different node. In my example project, that node location is called near lock, but you can make it anything you want, just as long as there is a matching location set up in your global controller object. With the correct parent object set, modify the create event so that the exit_location variable points to the location you want the player to go when the zone is clicked on. Last, for the purposes of switching between perspective and panoramic modes, you can set the exit direction to the proper number. Make some more pano zones and place them in their appropriate rooms, being sure to change the exit location to link them to their proper destinations. Scale them and adjust them, and then use the debug mode we set up to help. Now, when I run my game, I can move around and navigate between 360 panoramas, and even between my bubbles and my fixed perspective nodes. Something I wasn't able to figure out is how to have video objects play while in panoramic perspective. There might be ways to expand my code, or it might be better to just do this whole thing in a different engine like Godot or Unreal if you're really set on using exclusively 360 panoramas. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this series. I hope it helps you create your own 3D worlds in Game Maker Studio 2. Please feel free to find me on Blue Sky at Uncanny Valerie or on itch.io at valerie-paris.itch.io. Remember, you can get access to the full tutorial project for free. Just check the link in the description. When you download the project, you'll get all of the code used to make this tutorial, including the Blender camera render script and the automatic image cropping script. Finally, you'll get a pack of cursors in 4 different styles that you can use to build your own point-and-click experiences. Donations are very much appreciated, but everything is totally free to download and use.